Blake, do you really feel like there's a first time for everything?
I'm going to tell you what my government teacher told me. If you don't get caught, it wasn't illegal.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm Blake, and a lot of times the first time you do something, it gets you in trouble. And I'm here with Toby Walters, who's never been to jail, and my co-host, Toby Walters.
I've never been to jail as far as you're aware.
Oh my gosh.
You didn't do a background check on me when you got hired.
Did you do a background check on me?
No, but we are actually starting to do background checks.
Are we
because
for real?
like we're becoming a real company. It's so weird.
Please don't do one on me.
I know.
have some bodies.
So first time for everything. This is our first time ever to have a 2-part episode.
Tech, yeah, it is.
And you and I had a little first time ever last night. Actually, my son had a first time ever in that he went to his first concert ever. And Blake, you were there too.
How did it feel, Toby, attending the concert with your second favorite son, knowing that your first was there? I wrote that joke yesterday night.
Who's my first favorite son?
Me,
Blake?
obviously.
Oh my gosh. So we went to NF last night, and not like we were on a date, Blake. You went with your wife, right?
We went together. We just went completely different sections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a great show. I thought the sound was fantastic. I thought the system was designed beautifully. And
where were you at? I was literally the top elevation on the thing.
yeah, I was pretty close to the top of the.
I thought it sounded awesome.
Yeah.
Now I have nothing to compare it to. I've got that artist with that mix and that stadium, but I thought this sounds tremendously better than I expected.
So I had the unfortunate reality of going to, so this is at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, and 2 nights previous, I went and saw Greta Von Fleet, which I really enjoy Greta. It's like a modern day Led Zeppelin, but the sound was terrible. And I was sitting, again, way up in the 300 section, and all we were getting was like the reflections, the way the system was designed, the array hangs, they were not hitting the upper ranges. So we were just getting the bounce from the arena, and it was terrible. And so I was just assuredly hoping that the NF system would be designed better, and it really was. It sounded amazing.
So then you have the literal A/B test from the same week. So that tells us that the NF front of house mixer was kind of crushing it.
And I mean, you don't realize this. I mean, every artist is different, but NF has the advantage in that a lot of his sound is through tracks. Like the front of house guy is just mixing direct tracks. He's not doing, live amps and they did have a live drummer. NF is singing with a live drummer, but that's it. Everything else is tracks. So it does make his job a little easier.
Speaking of tracks, I do have a question for you. How do we feel about that? Because it was very clear to me. Tell me if I'm right about this. He had a track rapping the whole thing for him, and then he was just singing with it. And I was like, it's kind of weird.
So I was, as my son and I were driving to the concert, we were listening to some NF to prepare ourselves. And
No freaking way.
A song "Hope" off his new record.
Best song he ever did.
30 years of this, 30 years of that. And so I turned to my son, I said, how in the world is he going to pull this off live? Because the rapping he is doing is just insane. How does he even remember that? How does he even breathe? And so for him to have the backing track is essentially, he's rapping on top of himself rapping, and it makes a much bigger sound. I know it's like you can look at it as they're cheating, but also there's no way to pull it off. Like it's humanly impossible, as far as I can tell, to do it without that rap track.
Yeah, I do think it feels like a cheat, and it also feels necessary. I do have a take from the concert. I've never been to a big concert. Like I've did a sat down thing at the winery with Siggy back in the day, but I mean that's not like a stadium. I don't know why we do fireworks anymore. We should just do lighting design shows, because lighting design kicks fireworks. Ross beep this. It literally kicks its. It's incredible.
And it's a different world now than it was 20 years ago. Like the lighting technology has come so far. And I mean, we've had several great lighting designers on as guests, and what they are able to do is just, they are absolutely artists creating a scene that is unimaginable now with the toys they have to play with. But it was awesome.
Weren't you dead center
No, it's a little off to the right.
Well, because like at one point it looked like it was shooting the lights into the crowd, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I can't imagine sitting over there."
Yeah, it had some lasers that were just, they were so cool.
It was incredible. So now we're going to take back to our part 2 of our episode with Caleb Loeppky. Wanted to keep the intro story, keep a little bit of the structure the same. So here's back to that conversation.
Okay, Blake, I want to just lay out the numbers here.
Oh my gosh, wait, what? On what?
So you guys help me through this. I'm going to walk through where my mind goes through what we've seen on this survey, what we know about the reality of the world, me being an employer and hiring people. I just want to lay out like categories of numbers on where churches and people should expect to land.
All right, you're the grand poobah now.
Caleb, push back on any of this. I'm going to say 38 to 48 is entry-level salary for an entry-level position, like a tech associate, somebody that's, running sound at different events, doing VBS and youth during the week. They're coming up, they're young on the team, and they're not in a leadership role. Like 38 to 48 in that range is totally reasonable for entry-level.
I would bump that to 40 to 50. In my world,
Okay.
I think the only caveat is the billies. Okay, the billies that are like
Billy.
the real young, or whatever that looks like. Oftentimes they will, jump in at that closer to $40,000 range. I am not saying that is a job or a number that you should jump at. There has to be some very specific things like you as a candidate are looking at and going, hey, does this work for me? One other thing that I want to say real quick, like as we talk about numbers, is like when you're talking about negotiations in your salary, everything that you are getting in that offer letter is negotiable. Everything. Your vacation time, your whatever else that you want to have, your cell phone, reimbursement, your mileage, your if you're a pastor, this could be a stipend account for books and resources and conferences. It could be, I don't like
work from home days, maybe.
Yeah, work from home days, whatever that is. Like literally everything is negotiable in this conversation. And so there's many, many times that churches, and I hear this from candidates. I was literally interviewing a candidate like a couple weeks ago that they were like, hey, we know that we as the church cannot pay you more money. Like our budget is completely tapped. We love you. We want to do everything we possibly can to keep you, but we know that it's tapped. So here's what I'm going to offer you. It's basically like for this guy, it was like an unlimited vacation policy. Basically, it's like get your crap done, and you don't have to be here if your crap is done. Like we very much expect you to do your stuff and be proactive and like still building stuff. But if that takes you 35 hours in a week to do it, see you later. We'll see you next week. Like that's a very real value when you look at money versus time. And so it's just something to note in the process.
Yeah, that's great to add in there. And also don't take these numbers and then go to your church and say, hey, I listened to the Church Gear podcast and they said, yeah, there's a lot of helpful advice. So we're 40 to 50 range for like entry-level techs, associates, whatever. And we know that all of these things are kind of a sliding scale depending on where you live. Like California and Oklahoma are different cost of living. So we recognize there's some difference there. Caleb, I'm going to assume like if you are a tech lead, if you're an audio lead or audio director, a video director, or if you're like a campus lead, a campus tech director, that it should be like 55 to 65 kind of range, maybe even a little more depending on experience and skill level.
Yeah, I think I like to think of them in less of like the role titles and more of the church size. I think that that's more of an accurate representation to what a church can pay rather than like what the role is titled. There's a lot of like at the chapel, I was production director. At Christ Community, I think I started as technical director, and just because of their language, and then for some reason during a reorg, we changed it to production director. And so like the titles can get confusing to people, and people get very all like up in the air about what their title is. And so when you look at church size, you go, okay, like I understand the size and scale of what a church of 1,500 to 2,000 of a TD role is versus a church of 6,000 and 4 multi-sites. Like that's very, very different role, although the titles could be the same.
And once you get to kind of the multi-site, you start to get the title of global. I know we're trying to steer away from titles, but you get the reality of like you're now a global tech director, or you're you're leading a team, a staff of like 4 or 5 people, and that's a very different thing than being the tech director at a 1,500 person church where you're like, it's me full time and I've got some volunteers. But I assume as you step into some of these, large multi-site churches and you are a global kind of director, you're leading large teams. Are we like 70 plus to be in a realistic range?
Yeah. I think, where I see a lot of those high level leadership roles, and we're talking, so like, let me talk about what this person looks like as the cartoon character. If you live in a marketing world or whatever this is, like, who is that
customer avatar
end person? Yeah. The customer avatar. And so when I think of that, let's keep the guy's name as Billy because it works. Has been in a multi-site church before, or been in a very large church. Maybe it's only one campus, but they're serving at a very, very high level. And typically in those seats, they could be reporting to an executive pastor. They could be reporting to a creative director, creative pastor. Sometimes it's a worship pastor, but the bigger the church you go, I don't know, the more like people that end up being above you, in many ways. When I think of age ranges, these people are typically in their like lower 30s. 30 to 35 years old is a sweet spot where they haven't like completely moved out of a ridiculous salary bracket that's not possible for some churches yet. But they're definitely on the high end of some of those roles, and they have led full-time or part-time staff before. It's very, very important to churches that we are surveying from a Slingshot perspective, obviously depending on size, but like if there are people underneath them, just like you or I wouldn't necessarily want somebody to come in and just like be my boss who's never been a boss of somebody before. That feels a little scary. And on the flip side, I go, well, then when in the world are people going to take a chance on them to actually do it? Like, so I get it. Like I got lucky to step in a role that I had been in before, or that I had been in and then was kind of promoted internally to this role. So now I had the experience to say on my resume, hey, I led, 4 full-time staff or whatever it was. And so I think that's a massive, massive piece to that. And then whether you like it or not, like me having 3 children, I have a 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, or a 5-year-old who turns 6 next week, and a 4-year-old, like that adds a very real financial dynamic that changes for me and my needs. For me and my wife than it does for my wife and I if we didn't have any kids and we lived in the exact same place. It's just like the numbers might not be that far off, but they would definitely be different, or at least my attitude about making sure that I got it is very different. And I go, I just won't say yes to that. Like, it's just not possible, so.
Yeah. And there are, and I mean, you can confirm this for us, there are $80,000, $90,000, even $100,000 plus jobs out there at large churches looking for high-level leaders, production directors, even pastors of production. But I assume as the salary gets bigger, the church gets bigger, then their expectations of the qualifications of the candidate get way higher as well. So, we also need to approach this point, like if you want to move from that $40,000 level entry tech up to, $90,000, $100,000 plus, like you got a long road of leadership skills, like tech skills, people skills that you need to develop along the way, because there's a whole lot more $40,000 production jobs out there than there are close to $100,000 production jobs.
Correct. That is the most accurate statement you could possibly say. There are those roles that pay 80, 90, 100 plus, positions, often with a housing allowance. Those are great salaries, regardless of like where you're at in the country. Like it's very, very livable. But they're very far between each of those roles. Like you don't find them every day. Don't expect to find them every day. And to be honest, the church, if they're offering that much for one of these people, they have some serious expectations that you're going to come in with this experience or knowledge to be able to lead at that capacity and actually like serve the church well. And if I'm being honest, guys, like there's not a lot of those people in the country anymore. They've all moved on to other things. And I don't want to say, like, if I take myself for an example, not that I'm like this most incredible production person on the planet in any way, shape, or form, but I left a year ago. I hit 10 years and I left a year ago, 10 years of ministry, and I left to go do my next thing. And will I ever go back to a church one day? Maybe, if God calls me back into something like that. But for now, like, I left and I stepped away. And so knowing that, like, who are these churches going to find if the people who are in your current seats, who are making 50, 60, 65, whatever that is, isn't growing into becoming the leader that is that $90,000, production person at a very large church, that you have influence and decision-making and, authority to do things in a role and execute at a high level.
It's funny you say that, because I'm not remembering it offhand, but I want to say our 18 years plus was the most amount of people in the survey. Like, we had a lot of people who'd done that. And then we also, I want to say 8 to 10% of our people said 90K plus salaries. So, like, yeah, they definitely are out there and exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Caleb, you may not know this answer, but what would you say typical, let's even properly paid tech director? Let's just go with Billy's making $65K at a 1,500 person church. He's the tech director there. What could Billy essentially, and this is really hard to answer, if he left and he went out into the industry, could he easily make 100K? Or is, like, the discrepancy between, like, going out and working for the touring industry or in a news station, is it that big a difference?
You're talking big a difference in salary?
Yes.
Man, that's a great question. I mean, I think so much of it has to do seriously, like, on their skill set. I mean, I know guys that work in a church that possibly either have previous touring experience or have the chops because of their church size or what they're doing and the level of production that they're doing. I go, any one of those guys could tour tomorrow and crush it. Many, many guys from Bayside out in California, great friends of mine, all those guys came out of there and are doing incredible touring opportunities now that they've left church and are, like, crushing it. I don't know how much they're making, but they're doing great. So when you look at people who, like, leave full-time church, like, let me speak to the freelance side of it. It's about the skills that you have, but I would say even more, it's about the people that you know. Like, if you have somebody who works for or who owns a production company or is local to your area and you're able to, get some sub freelance work while you're full-time at a church, that's great. And if you ever want to leave, I'm sure they take many more of your day rates, to be able to come in and do whatever you want to do. You just got to be willing to travel your butt off and be willing to be on the road. And it goes back to that time versus, money, conversation. And it's like, I don't really know. So it's out there, but, like, I would not tell, like, church production people to jump out of their role to go try to make a bunch of money going freelance. I mean, I think it's possible, but you better have some really, really great contacts to make sure that you can hit your, kind of money income requirement that you're going to try to hit on a monthly basis.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a lot of travel is on the table in that scenario. Caleb, one of the things that I thought was interesting that I just want to hit real fast was reporting to everyone. We had the following as people that we're reporting to: creative pastor, worship leader, executive pastor, lead pastor, production manager. All of them had 15 to 26% of the vote. Who should tech people be reporting to? Like, is there actually a clear answer there? Like, are any of those warning signs if you see it on a job application that you'd be reporting to X? Like, are any of those, don't go there, or, oh, you should go here?
Oh man, I've seen everything in the reporting structure and, like, where people are landing. I think I don't feel like I have a good answer, but the answer that I would say is that it's different in every church. And when I think of, like, church size, I like going back to that church size scenario of, like, that 1,500 to 2,000 person church. Typically, the executive pastor is also doing all of operations, all of finance, all of, let's say, whoever might be overseeing IT or facilities and stuff like that. And so oftentimes these production people land under an XP, where I wouldn't call them peers with a worship pastor, but, like, they're in a different department and definitely have, like, we would call them solid lines or dotted lines, to whatever their leader is. And I think as it grows and as like a church grows size, it all of a sudden turns into, hey, there has to be a buffer because the creative department between worship and production, or let's say even communications, there's got to be a bridge there because now the XP has way too many people to have reporting to them. And so they'll bring in a production or like a creative pastor or something like that, possibly the worship pastor is reporting to, possibly the worship pastor is also the creative pastor. I see that all the time as well. And there's no right or wrong answer, but the only thing that I would say that's like crucial to anybody's listening's like success, is if you have the opportunity to help shape or influence that decision of who I'm reporting to, like, do it with somebody you work well with. I mean, seriously, people don't leave jobs because of the job or the organization. They leave jobs because of their leader. That's just that is the case so often. I have done that before. Christ Community, I was not leaving my boss. My boss there was amazing. And she was one of the best like leaders that I ever had in ministry for me. So that's a, kind of different scenario, but for so many people, like if they don't have like the good relationship that's honest with those, with their superior, like it just doesn't go well. You can't have these honest conversations, and it kind of takes away like this like ministry mindset that churches should have. And, it can very easily turn into like this corporate hierarchy of org chart. And it's very important that like you as a person in your organization, regardless of where you sit in the org chart, think of it like that and go, hey, God has put me in the spot for where I'm at today, and I'm going to try to serve the best I can. So there's no right or wrong answer about like who they should report to, but often it's going to be the worship pastor, creative pastor, or an XP.
Okay, we're switching gears again. I feel like we're playing popcorn questions today. And
poor
like
Caleb's having to do whack-a-mole with all of the hardest topics in church tech. Look at his face.
So let's switch gears a little bit to expectations of the job and hours. So a church tech could be, let's say he's offered $65K to come to this church, and here's your job description, and you understand that Christmas and Easter are going to be crazy times, and there's going to be a couple months during summer where everything slows down a bit, so it's going to balance out. But all of a sudden, Aunt Jean died. You need to run sound for her funeral, and then we got a wedding this week, and we got VBS needs you to come run sound for them. And all of a sudden, there's all these extra events, all these expectations that, all of a sudden you're working 65 hours a week doing all these extra events. Do churches pay extra for these, or should the tech negotiate, kind of a contract rate for outside events that the church is putting on them, or extra hours? And all of your wisdom.
To give you some context, like when we looked through the written responses, we got a lot of people talking about this. One of the quotes that we highlighted was, it'd be nice if salary people were eligible to be paid the same hourly wage as hourly employees when we work over 40 hours due to special events like banquets, conventions.
Yeah.
Toby mentioned the funeral thing. I'm not going to say this person's name, obviously, but I know of a person that the most angry they ever were with their pastor was when they had to do a random funeral and their pastor it got dumped on them. We travel and talk to a lot of techs, and that did not go well. Sorry, to finish the quote, they usually don't take away any of our weekly duties and simply add to them. I agree we shouldn't get paid for events if we stay under 40 hours that week, but often that's not the case. So just talk to us about events and how you guys handle that.
Events were the bane of my existence as a production director, because in a multi-site environment where I was go back to the global language, global production, person overseeing all of these campuses, all of the staff, or some sort of mixture of them. We had so many campuses and so many different events, women's ministries, funerals, weddings, all this stuff. Like I could have hired a full-time person just to oversee all of these events. And it doesn't stop, like ever, it does not stop. And so part of that was a massive initiative that I made, both of the chapel. It was a little more structured when I came to Christ Community, which I'll walk through. But at the chapel, we had basically presented an option to the executive pastor at the time of just going, hey, if it's an outside organization, they have to pay us like as the production person, like kind of a non-negotiable. It's a very, very low rate. I mean, it's like $150 or $200, to show up for an hour or 2 hours for a wedding. You make a couple $100, they pay you directly. It doesn't touch the church. Great. Awesome. Here's the problem. You're doing a funeral, okay? And all the family members are sad because it's a funeral. You don't want to be the guy that walks up and was like, hey man, like, I'm going to go now. Can I like get paid? Like, that's awkward. That's real awkward.
Blake does it to me all the time.
Right after your family members die? How many family members you have dying, Toby? And who's killing them?
I mean, it's, I literally like walked away from a wedding once and I was like, well, I'm not going to get paid for that because I cannot go and ask for this funeral or whatever it was. So in that context,
should have just gone up to the bride's father and put your hand out. He's used to getting bills in that season of his life.
Hey man, give me some money, please. Watch Parks and Recreation.
Money, please.
Like, money, please.
That's what I did when I took a shot at Toby. I just went, money, please.
That tickled me good. I do that all the time.
Caleb, I also acted like
quick moment of brevity. Parks or Rec or Office?
Office. Sorry.
I think I might give it 51% Office, but I think Parks or Rec's right there. All right. Yeah. Anyways, events.
So we had that kind of policy, like outside events, and for the most part, like that was our expectation. But then when it came to internal events, like, hey, women's pastor has a Tuesday night gathering every night, and because their group has grown over, let's say, our smallest venue in the church, like now they have to move up to this larger venue that has more technology needs. And for me to make sure that on Sundays or on Thursday nights for rehearsal, like things are going well, I have to be there. So that really sucks. And part of the thing that we try to do, and this was not just from a staffing side, but like we try to create systems and processes that were as simple as possible to use for a volunteer to walk in, push a button, turn a projector on, projector drops down, whatever it is, microphone, all these things, super stupid simple so that they could set it up themselves. And then our staff, as the global production centralized team, was responsible for making sure that they were trained. And if they aren't trained effectively, then it's your problem to make sure that this event happens. So our rule was basically like, you don't have to do every single event, but you have to make sure that event is set up for success. And sometimes that's through training a volunteer. Sometimes it's through finding another volunteer who might be serving on your team and mixing audio week to week that wants more opportunities. Hey man, can you do this thing on Tuesday night? Or whatever that looks like. And then when I went to, so that was like the chapel's policy when I was there, that we had kind of created, at Christ Community. I believe at the time for outside events, they were paying, I think it was very similar structure. Like the organization paid the employee directly, but it was like a lot more structured, where I think that like the people, hey, we're having a wedding. Like I think they signed an agreement. Like, hey, we're going to pay the pastor this much and we're going to pay the tech person this much. There were times that like, hey, let's say it was a big funeral in the church and like a really like, I don't know. We actually had a pastor die on staff. Like it was all hands on deck. There's no getting paid. Like this is what you do. Our entire church is basically there. Our staff is there. Like we're working and we're not, expecting to get paid more for it. So there are seasons like that, but my view on it and what I like to think that churches think, but it's not always the case, is get your crap done and do it really, really well. Develop your team, do everything you're supposed to do. And regardless of the amount of time that takes during your middle of your week, get it done. And if you get it done in 35 hours, then awesome, and go home. And if you get it done in 45, then awesome, and go home. There's this, thought process that I've always had of like, in college, if I had a paper that was due at midnight on Friday, it would magically take me until midnight on Friday to get it done. And I would perfectly get it done in time at 11:59. I'd hit submit and it would be awesome. And that C- paper would be forever in my transcript. If that paper was all of a sudden changed to Wednesday night at midnight, it would magically get done at Wednesday night at midnight. You make time for the things that are important to you, and you will give as much time in procrastinating as whatever time allows to do that. That could be for Christmas scenic design. It could be for taking your volunteer out to coffee. It could be for whatever thing that you are procrastinating on doing. If there's no time limit or accountability on it, people will take forever to do it. So I also go, this is me being very real now. Okay. I left ministry a year ago. I didn't realize, well, first I'm going to preface this with saying, I've been on the Church Gear podcast. I've been on a billion other podcasts, and I say the same thing.
We're your favorite, though, right? Wait. We're your favorite.
I'm your favorite. I'm your favorite. At the end of the day, I was a massive advocate for not wanting to be burned out, not wanting to work more than what I should, trying to get my guys to not work as much. And my thought process in my head was, I work like crazy. This is insane. I work every weekend. I do all this other stuff. This is terrible. And then I left church. And a year later, I can say that I had more free time on my hands at church than I ever have had in my entire life. That's just me. And I think that deep down, there's many other people that would say that. And I don't say that I was just sitting around, but what I would say now is my role is very different today. In working at Amplio and what I do here, it's very, very different. I have a team. We work Monday to Friday, and we work with our heads down, and we do great work. It's awesome. It's very, very different because of the schedule of the way that my weeks were oriented at church. It was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. I had rehearsal. I was off on Mondays and Fridays. We had Saturday services and Sundays. So there was all this weird breakup in the middle of the week of when are we coming in today? When do we not? It was so loosey goosey that it allowed for me to just have more space. And I built that space in for our team too. We made sure that we weren't just running around like crazy every week. But I feel that. I was telling my dad that last week, where I was just man, I feel the weight of maybe I had more free time than I thought on my hands, because now I'm working at a different capacity and a different speed. And it's just it's very different for me. So that's my personal experience. And I thought it was a joke because somebody told me before I left, they're you don't know how cush your job is. Why are you leaving? I was what are you talking about, man? He's my best friend. And he was your job is so cush, and you're going to have a wake up call when you get to the real world. And I was okay. And, I wouldn't say that it's terrible, but it's very, very, very different than what I, thought that I had in my head of my perceptions of what I was doing at church. So that's my perspective. And I would call it out to say that there's a lot of people that are doing the same in their church.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because you're just being vulnerable yourself. You're not calling about anybody else. You're just saying that's your experience. And I know from talking, we've hired guys that, were in full-time production director roles in churches, and it can be grueling, but it's a weekly rhythm. You're making Sunday happen each week. And like you said, there's a lot of weird times around that. But when you jump out into just normal business, business just never stops. And there is no weekly rhythm. It's just, I'm awake. Yes, there are emails to answer. There is stuff to do. So there are pros and cons of both things. But just because you're feeling burnout, don't think that life is easier just out in the business world necessarily.
Yeah, correct. I would say in general, regardless if you're going out of ministry or if you're going to another church, I ask candidates all the time, and I tell them all the time, the grass is not greener. The grass is never greener wherever you're going. You know what your yard looks like where you're at. You know the pea brown spots you got around the yard and the weeds and all this other junk that you have.
Blake.
I was just about to joke. It sounds like I'm the only one with greener grass, because this job kicks my other job's butt.
I'm paying you too much.
Toby,
apparently.
don't hear that.
And you know what you're living in. You know what's good and what's bad about where you're at, and you can jump over the fence and see a little bit of green and go, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. My dad says it best. There are stupid people everywhere you go. Okay, so I'm not calling all of you stupid. I'm just saying that many of us work with some stupid people. And every job that I've ever been at, there's always been, I don't want to call them all stupid, so I rescind maybe that.
Okay.
I feel like I'm digging myself a giant grave of just like, I'm going to have no job here.
Look, I will say,
after this
Caleb, we're
podcast
putting a
comes
lot
out.
of push behind the series. This could be our most visible thing all year. So
Yeah,
Oh, Lord.
We're live streaming
Okay,
this
well.
to the rest of the Amplio team as well right now.
Please don't.
no,
I
dude,
love- I love my Amplio team.
all your responses have been extremely thoughtful and measured. I think you're
Yeah.
fine.
I just think, I don't know, the grass isn't always greener. So know what you're walking into and know that the calling in your life, regardless of where you're going, whether it's church or an outside organization, an integrator, a tour, I don't care what you're doing. Just know, like, if God is like calling you into that and you feel like this thing is bringing me joy, like joy, I believe, is the way that God uses the calling on our heart to go, hey, I think you should do more of this because it brings you joy, because you find peace in doing it, because it brings you happiness. Like, that's God going, hey, you should probably do some more of that. Like, this is really, really good. So if you can find a job to do it, awesome. If you got to do it from a volunteer seat, even better. That's great.
Okay, so we got Billy. We've helped him advance to a
Billy's got gray hair now at this point.
we've helped him advance
Super
to a
gray.
$65,000 salary, let's just say. And Billy has grown his leadership skills and his tech skills and all those people skills up to that level. And the church has reasonable expectations around outside events. He's making a few bucks here and there running occasional outside events.
He got married to the worship pastor.
There you go. But Billy's still thinking, man, I really need 80 to provide for my family. And I don't want to switch jobs. I like my job. I like my church. Let's talk about, Caleb. How often is it realistic for those guys to write into their just their benefits, essentially, to have a certain amount of flex days where they can take outside events, where they can charge $300 to $600 for a day rate and have certain amount of days per year where they can go do that and add on to their salary?
Yes. Sometimes that is unsaid, and sometimes it is said and written. One of the things that I did for some of my staff over the last 10 years was, like, I knew that in certain scenarios, I wanted them to make more money. And I, as their leader, didn't have the power to just snap my fingers and go, here's 60K. I just couldn't. So one of the things that I would do often is, like, get your crap done. And if you want to go freelance on Fridays, or if you want to go freelance whenever it is, you let me know. We'll work around it. If you got to come in later to do, something else, or come in early on a Saturday to finish up some work, that's fine with me, because you can make an extra $20,000, $25,000 a year by freelancing and doing a bunch of contract work. And it doesn't affect us any differently, but your livelihood is better and you're happier because you're providing for your family better. The dance and the scary part about that is the world that I live in. And I don't like calling what I do at Slingshot a side hustle. It's something that I'm so passionate about, and I would do it even if I didn't make money doing it, because I care so deeply for, like, this church production community and making sure that, like, they're being advocated for, and that, like, people take them seriously. Part of what that looks like for me was, like, giving people time to go freelance when they wanted to and when they were able to. And eventually, if you do that more and more and more, though, you can find yourself working on your days off. You can find yourself, like, not taking a Sabbath, like, not doing the things that, like, is so crucial to your, like, longevity in your role. And my people and my staff or myself are not better if we're just working on our days off to compensate for a low salary or whatever this is that you want to make up, or you just want to make extra money and your salary is great. It doesn't really matter. There's a very dangerous game in, like, doing that, and you have to make sure that it's, like, still honoring, like, a day off for you and your family.
I was about to say lots of things there. We talk about taking care of your family, and the Bible says that. Also, like you say, says taking a Sabbath. I'd also say if you're finding yourself overworked at every job, it's probably, like you said, like, maybe you're not, or the grass is not always greener. But also, I had probably the wisest man I know tell me, like,
What did I tell you?
It was all right. I'll just say it. It was BD, Brian Deshawn, say that, like, if you're working all the time, maybe you need to look a little inward. Maybe you're running from something. And, like, that was very wise. Okay, I think I want to throw Caleb
Under the bus?
No.
Oh, okay.
He's thrown himself under the bus
That's
like
true.
100 times.
Yeah, which makes this a great episode.
Oh my gosh,
All right.
this is the worst.
Caleb, I want to hit one last meaty section with you about what does it mean to really be fairly compensated? Because, and this is where I really want to make sure, if you're an exec pastor listening to this, just know we are for you as well. And this section is to kind of play the other side, because we are for the church. We are church tech advocates, but
And by exec pastor, we mean whoever's making the salary decisions at these churches.
yeah, we know that's not easy.
Yeah.
I'm not a boss for that reason. So do you feel that anyone's ever going to feel like they're paid well? Because
Or fairly or correctly.
we had 2.5% say that they felt that they were overpaid. Now, we had people in this respondent survey that were making over 90. And I'm going to just tell you guys, like, my wife and I have decent jobs. I make more money than I thought I would as a kid. It's still like it's never like I'm not poor, but it's also like you never feel rich. So with 75% saying that they didn't feel that they were paid accurately and only 2.5% happy, like, is it possible you're just never going to feel paid enough? Like, where's the sweet spot between you should pay me more and also I should be grateful? Because I should be grateful is a part of it.
Yeah. The reality is you don't go into working at a church to make buckets of money. It just doesn't. It does not work like that. Churches want you to be comfortable in your role. They want you to be able to have a family and kids that have food on the table. I don't know of one church that wouldn't want that for their staff. So I say that to say, I don't think anybody will ever be satisfied with what they have. I mean, the reality is like we live today in 2023 and go, inflation is higher than it's ever been. My grocery bills at my house are more than they have ever been in my life. And I can't believe what I'm paying at the gas tank to fill up my truck and all of these things. It's terrible. Like, it's absolutely awful. And so I look at that and I go, even if I'm paid incredibly well, what is the rate of like the things going up around me to even keep up with like me being able to live at this, whatever life stage or lifestyle you're living at? It doesn't really matter. I just finished this week rereading the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And if you have not read it, you need to read it. And I would suggest every single production person read it. I read it.
Amen.
Maybe three or 4 years ago, and I reread it coming off of a summer vacation and feeling like, I was running myself into the ground in many ways in my family life and just a lot of different things. And so I reread that, and there's a whole section in that book about like, John is talking about like the love of money is the root of all evil. And the Bible tells us that in everything that we do, and chasing after money will not solve problems for you at all. And then there was this massive survey that he quoted, and I don't have the stats in front of me. I wish I did. That basically your well-being and your ability to increase your happiness, this is the worldly view. So this is like, and then there was a massive amount of people that did the survey. The median income in the United States for the well-being and happiness to get to that actually like money increases that is $75,000, regardless of if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area or if you're in Waco, Texas, which is very, very, very interesting. And any number above that number does not increase happiness or the value of what you think that you're bringing to your table or your family or the things you can buy. And in that survey was quoted that it actually has the ability and often like decreases happiness in many, many ways over that number. And that was the number that this like third party, did with hundreds of thousands of people surveyed across the country, which is fascinating. And I go, yep, more money, more problems, like always,
Me and my best friend have this phrase where we go, more money, more problems, and we pause, but still more money.
That's hilarious.
I want to sort of a final little statement. And again, I'm not trying to get us into trouble with churches. Like, I love the church. That's why I do what I do to help serve churches. But I feel like we've got to update this average salary for church tech. So our survey, Blake, showed what's the average range for church salaries?
The majority were getting paid 30 to 40, and then it was like 70% were making less than 60. And then with Caleb's stat at 75, I almost feel like if we could just write everyone up to 70 at least, and then do a check-in in a year, we'd be in a good spot.
So, Caleb, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like we need to move this average salary range from 30 to 40 up to 50 to 60. Like, that's where the average church tech, knowing that entry-level church techs probably shouldn't be making quite, 55 yet. They should be in the
Billy
40s
is
range,
still in the 40s.
But
sadly.
like, yeah, 50 to 60 should be average. And then, you should have a pathway to be making 75 plus if you're in a high-level role.
Yeah, I think it's a bell curve, right? There are always going to be outliers in both sides of the scenario. You're going to have people that make way more. You're going to have people that make way less. And so much of it, like, I don't know what, you guys are doing with some of that data, but like when I've looked at, like many times churches look at compensation studies that they get from large organizations that like often they pay to buy in, and then they share every single data, everything from this is how much our senior pastor makes to worship pastor. And these are in sizes of churches that are anything from, the range is, 500 to 1,000, 250 to 500, all the way from the micro churches to massive multi-site churches, the biggest in the country. And they put down there what these salaries are making so that executives or senior leadership of churches can go, are we on par with that? The problem is, if everybody's paying low amount of money for these church production people and they all buy into this survey, then is it actually like increasing the value of like what these people are bringing to the table? I don't think so. And I think it's important for churches to go, hey, what is the right salary for this person that fits in line with our pay scale at the church? There's an incredible pastor that I know that I had the privilege of hanging out with at Refuge in Wyoming last year. And one of the things for him and his church plant was the elders came to him and said, we need to pay you more. And he goes, I don't want to be paid more. You don't need to pay me more. And they go, we don't pay you more, you will brick us in the pay scale of anybody else we hire in the next 10 years. I don't know what he's making. No idea. It doesn't really matter. But there's a very real thing of going, hey, you can't necessarily make more than your boss, or it's not a good look if you do, is the reality of it. And most churches frown upon that and try not to do that. So if you're trying to make 75 in your role, you might not even know if your boss makes that. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just going like, what is the reality of where you're at, and making sure that that's in line with like what is doable for the church. So yeah, that's just another, kind of side note for all of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, especially because you're going to really constrain yourself if you hold on to that ideology. Well,
are we going to land this plane?
I don't want to, man.
Man,
Caleb is dropping
I know.
gold. He's being vulnerable. His backdrop is very nice for the video. Caleb, if we were so we're shifting the tech takeaway to what is one thing you would say to a church tech, a pastor, an executive pastor, just in general about what we've talked about today. So you can pull, from anything from who's people reporting to, or don't take an offer and slam it on the desk, just whatever it is. What would you say to one of those roles to kind of put a bow on our discussion?
I would say, I'm going to say two. I'm going to say one of the church production guy, and I'm going to say one to the XP or senior leader, whoever that person is. To the production person, the work that we do is a calling. Like it's faithfulness at its finest to go, hey God, I know that you called me into what I'm doing. Here's the reasons why. And it's very important that you find small bits of joy in the things that you do. And whatever you can do, find incredible amounts of joy in whatever that is, and shape your work day, shape your work week around the things that bring you joy, that does affect the local church and helps your church become better in, your area. Because if you don't have the joy, you'll start looking elsewhere. You'll start looking for other jobs or to try to find that somewhere else. And I think churches need great production men and women more now than they've ever needed before in the history of time. COVID played to that. There's so many other reasons why today, like that's so important. But I would just say like the work you do really, really matters. Being vulnerable again. When I was what I was just describing at this retreat at Refuge in Wyoming. I was with 25 executive pastors, and I was a production person that just left ministry 2 weeks before. So I left August 1st. I was no longer on staff at church. August 14th of last year, I was in Wyoming with 25 other XPs.
And he was ready to give him an earful, baby. He's not employed anymore.
I wanted to, because the reality was I viewed those leaders the same way that I had viewed other executive pastors in my world before, and they weren't amazing views. They were views of just like, you're out to get me, you're all of the things that we all say to our bosses, say to ourselves in the shower, say to our wives when we get home, like all of these things. These executive pastors were sitting here, and I had so much guilt, as me being very vulnerable, for leaving ministry. I had so much guilt because these guys were telling stories of like what they had done in the last 20 years of ministry, and then, all of the crazy stuff that they've done. And I was a guy that walked away and wanted to do something else because, I felt like God was calling me to that, and it was all fine. But like the guilt that I have or had, and some days still have, to serve the local church in that way, was very real. And so like, it's a calling in your life. So for you as a church production person, like dive in and try to be the best possible person you can be. And through that, healthy church cultures will bless and reward that for people that are doing really great work at the church. And your opportunity is not limited by the brick wall or glass ceiling that you think it might be in your role, if you're willing to like do some hard things and like step into hard conversations and lead at a different capacity than what you probably have been at the very surface level. And I'm telling you that because I did it for years. It's not because I'm telling you you're doing it. It's because I think there's a lot of people that did things like me and thought that they were diving in deep, and I wasn't diving in nearly as much as I should have. And on the flip side, to the XP or senior pastor, you have a bunch of grumpy church production people that wear black. I'm wearing white today to be the opposite of that. They deeply care about their craft. They're really, really smart people. And the value that they bring to your organization will be determined based on the leadership that you provide them. And so if you are not leading these people well, or if you aren't encouraging them to come under your wing of leadership and the pastoral skills that you have developed in the same way that they have developed their production skills, it's not going to work for anybody. So you have to be willing to like pour into these people from a leadership and culture development skill. Because when somebody did that for me, and an executive pastor did that for me, Rick Egbert, it was a game changer in the way that I viewed ministry, the way that I viewed my team, the way that I led my team, and the way that I interacted with volunteers and like serve on a weekend. And so like, you not doing that for your team is a disservice to them. And so do it as much as you possibly can, or get somebody else to do it for you if you don't have time to do it. So, it's an amazing, amazing community of people. And I think that we are in this season right now that is a very, very big change and shift in the church production circle of like who these people are, where they're coming from, and where they're going compared to the last 10 or 20 years. And I'm very hopeful for that. And I hope that like, through this podcast, through what Church Gear does, through what I get to do at Slingshot, through what I get to do at Amplio, and just like being me, that we can hopefully like help impact and make some like serious change in the church production community that like is more of a pastor than a skilled technician is what I want to see in the next 10 years. We still got to have skilled people, so don't stop doing that. But it's more important to be a better pastor than it is to be the best front of house guy in the world.
All right. Yeah. With this series, we're going to get Church Tech's two things: the title of pastor, and we're going to bump that average salary up. Listen, I think we could do it. You got a lot of the forces, all the players coming on this series. So Caleb, man, we cannot thank you enough for coming on. I don't know what order we're going to release these, but this will have been the first episode we've ever recorded that's become a two-parter. So thanks, man. Appreciate your time.
Sweet, dude. Man, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, I just made myself lightheaded by bending over. Does that mean I'm getting old?
Grandpa Toby, you have gone to 2 concerts this week on a Monday and a Wednesday, so I actually am willing to say that you're a spry young chicken. No more excuses on going to bed early at Philo. No more. This is 2 years in a row.
Can I go to bed early at the MXU conference?
Sure, but not, I don't know.
I mean, this is the end of part 2 of almost a 2-hour conversation with Caleb. And I mean, we were digging gold. Like, I'm exhausted from digging up gold.
And now we got to carry all that gold away.
Yes.
And you need to share that gold with people, Toby. Do you have enough energy to share this episode, to text it to a friend right now?
Well, I feel like the best thing I can do with sharing this gold is like to dole it out to get our church tech salaries up to that proper level. But I guess we can start doing it by posting this stuff on social media, raising awareness.
Yeah, especially if you're in a Facebook group, because you've got friends that don't know this happened and don't know these resources. You should share it with them. You really should.